Hello, welcome back to SkyRocket Automotive. Scirocco. Haven't had one of these down here before. Is this how it feels to get typecast? Long story short, this car's come down to me for a couple of bits for its MOT, rear brakes and emissions. I went to take a look at the emissions side of things because it didn't look like too big of a faceplant on the MOT test. I noticed it was running on 3 cylinders constantly. So I think we need to take a look at the health of the engine. The reason for that, it might just be a plug gone down. Maybe we went over rich, a time too many, it killed a plug, and now we're on 3. If that's the case, lovely, because I am rammed right now and could do with cars just disappearing like a beehive if possible. But just in case, I brought my compression tester with me. We might just put that on anyway, just to give a general health check of the engine. It's always good to let the owner know, hey, your engine's healthy, or hey, you might want to just keep half an eye on this and you might find that you've got a couple of issues going down the road. I'm not currently ruling out an air leak, but what I am going to do is check the compression side of things first, mostly because these engines are generally bomb-proof. When they start to behave like this, usually it's a result of inconsistent compression. We'd be mad not to look right now, because if I miss it and I tell him everything's hunky-dory and she goes pop, who's the idiot? This guy. Join us. So the point of this video is to basically show you the process from start to finish. Something's wrong, what's wrong with it, how do we diagnose what's wrong with it, how do we fix it, happy days the car's repaired. And through that process, we're going to do a few different things. The first thing we're going to do obviously is look at the spark plugs, read the plugs, see if there's anything obviously wrong with them. Then we're going to do a compression test. Then we're going to potentially look for air leaks. If we haven't solved the problem by then, we'll look for air leaks. Then we need to adjust the carburetor, and then we go for a test drive. And maybe some other stuff in between. We do what's necessary to find the fault. So there might be some lateral thinking, some hijinks, some idiocy, because I'm an idiot. The way I like to do a compression test is to take all the plugs out. There are multiple reasons for this. Number one, you've only got the socket in your hand one time. It speeds things up. And number two, there's much less strain on the starter motor, much less strain on the battery, because it's not having to turn over 4 cylinders when you're only actually interested in what one of the cylinders is doing. This also can give you a more accurate reading. The other thing, that one of the main reasons I do it this way, you can count how many compression strokes you've given the compression tester, so it's a fair test. The reason for that, very quickly, because I'll be explaining this as we go, the reason for that is you don't want to have one cylinder bump the tester twice and another cylinder bump it 5 times, because the one that bumps 5 times will give you a much higher reading, up to a point. Some safety stuff before we begin, I know. But if you burn your car to the ground, don't come to me, all right, because I told you. We're going to have all our cylinders open. First and foremost, disconnect the car's ability to make a spark, because what you don't want is fuel and oil vapor puffing out of the cylinders, atomized, and then a spark, because what you end up with at that point is an external combustion engine. We need to keep the combustion inside the engine. So I'm going to show you how to kill the coil. Obviously make sure there are no buckets full of ball bearings and swarf sat on top of your airbox, because you don't want chunks falling in the engine. Make sure your work area is tidy, clean, no bits. Disconnect the fuel supply from the carburetor. You will get a little bit of fuel naturally being drawn in through the carb. You just will, right? Because your float ball's got fuel in it. That's okay, as long as your spark's disconnected. What you don't want to do is keep pumping fuel in, because you'll just bore wash the engine. It's a bad scene. Now, here comes the dislike ratio in from low Earth orbit to just ruin the analytics on this video. It does not matter whether you have the throttle open or closed. There are countless videos explaining why that doesn't matter, one of whom is someone who knows infinitely more about engines than pretty much most people I know, Freiberger. He proved it. The reason I'm saying that is because you are measuring the compression of the engine. When the engine is compressing, the valves are closed. It makes no odds whether the throttle is open or shut. Save yourself some hassle, just don't bother. You don't need the throttle open, all right? Right, yeah, so disconnect the ability for the engine to make a spark, disconnect the fuel supply. Don't worry about opening the throttle, take all the plugs out in one go. The other reason is, when you take all the plugs out in one go, you can read them all, lay them out in front of the engine in the order they came out in, you can look, and you can maybe get an idea in your mind as to which cylinder's running rich, lean, whatever. If you take one plug out, and it's absolutely sopping in fuel, that's probably the one that ain't firing. You got a mini flood. The other three might be doing their job, but that one won't be. Get yourself a pen and paper. What we're looking for isn't necessarily an ideal number. Obviously, if every single cylinder is 3, you've got a problem. But what I'm saying is that the actual target is even compression. As an engine wears in, you may lose a little bit of compression, you get blow by, your valves coke up and they don't seat quite right. That's why engines feel so nice after a rebuild, if you've done a good job of it, because you get all your compression back. What we're after is compression that is even across the engine, within 10%. Okay? And I'll show you how to work all that out in a bit. Put it this way, if I can figure it out with my history with numbers, you can definitely do it. Aces, right, let's get these plugs out, shall we? Okie doke, first things first. Get our plug leads off. If you're unsure as to how these go in, if you're new to these engines, just put a couple of dots with a Sharpie or something on the leads, or nail varnish, whatever you want to use. Thankfully, these are already numbered, but I'm pretty au fait with these at this point. Now, obviously make sure all of this stuff is clear of any rotating assemblies, because you don't want to snag your HT leads up in your fan, if you've got a mechanical fan, obviously, or your alternator, etc., etc. He's all out of the way. Happy days. Now, ignition coil, you can knock these out by just unplugging the positive to them. That's actually good for the coil as well, because if you're leaving the ignition on for long periods, you don't want your coil being powered up without being able to discharge. I also then unplug the king lead as well. We know for certain then everybody's out. No chance of it. Right, disconnecting the fuel supply. Now, you might think you're going to want to go from here. The only trouble with that is, if you disconnect it from there, the fuel pump has got no way of relieving any pressure while you're cranking, and it's a mechanical fuel pump. So, we come to the carb intake. Ginger carefully. Mostly because you don't want to turn your knuckles into luncheon meat as you're doing this. This is running a Weber, by the way, but same for the Pierberg. So now our fuel line's disconnected. I found these door pins. This guy's a little on the short side. Something's happened to him in the past. But they're the perfect diameter to go in the fuel line. And because of the flute on the end, they make a lovely flanged seal. And then you just nip your Jubilee clip back up. Job's a good one, just like that. Obviously we can make sure that this is all right before we proceed. Why have I disconnected it from there? So my reason for disconnecting it from there, on these engines they've got a mechanical fuel pump, and they pump anytime the engine's rotating. The trouble with that is the fuel pump is dumb. It doesn't know that there's nowhere for the fuel to go, and it will work really, really hard, and eventually you could damage the fuel pump or pop a line off or whatever and spray fuel everywhere. If you disconnect it from here at the carb, when the carb decides it's had enough fuel, it closes the needle and seat valve, turns the fuel off. At that point, no fuel can come through here, so it comes back through our return line back to the tank. So essentially what we're doing is treating it as though the needle and seat is shut on the carb. It just means that we're not pumping fuel continuously into the engine, because it's just not great for an engine. And we already aren't sure how healthy this engine is. Our spark is dead, our fuel supply is dead, no danger of any sudden boom. RIP workshop, you're with the angles now. Hopefully these haven't been reefed on. Lovely. And what we'll do now, whip this out of here. So what do you do if you're on a K-Jet car, because they've got an electronic fuel pump? Even easier on a K-Jet car. All you have to do is disconnect the fuel pump fuse. Or relay, either or. And that just turns the pump off, and you ain't got to worry about it then. Right. Moment of truth with regards to the plugs. Cross everything that we've just got one very obviously gammy plug. Well, that probably ain't helping. 1. 2, extremely sooty. Oh, they're Super 4s. They're Super 4s. Hey, boys, no. No, no, no. We won't have that in here, thanks. No singing, no dancing, no swearing. This is a respectable house. Jesus. I'm surprised these plugs fire at all. Okay. Number one is looking like the really, really duff one at the minute, but they're all not great, are they? Let's be honest. I don't think my phone is capable of the contrast required to show that in any depth. Okay. That kidder doesn't look great, nor does number 3. They got some really weird deposits, and they're all got a film of oil on them. Oh dear. Good. That's great. I don't see a problem with that. If you don't, no, wait, the other thing. So, mystery solved, right? Spark plugs. Need to clean the plugs and put it back. No. No. Good Lord. Because how did that happen? We need to know what's going on here. That ain't good, man. That's really not good. Okay, we'll pop these on the windowsill of consideration. Very nice. They can just sit there for a minute and decide who's going to snitch on who. I'll be back, boys, with a Burger King. Okay, first one to give me a lead on this situation gets the Burger King. A word on compression testers, and I really hope I've caught this before you guys all click away deciding, well, I haven't got that special tool. This compression tester cost me about 20 quid. I don't buy stupidly expensive tools on principle, generally, but the only time I will buy something that is expensive is when it is proven to be better. Compression testers, it's a pressure gauge with a relief valve and some adapters. Just buy the one you can afford, all right? I'm not Mr. Tool Belt. I don't believe in that bullshit, to be honest with you. Right, these have an O-ring on them. As you can see, you ain't got a reef on them. They just need to seal. So let's go for cylinder 1 first. Just as much as the hose will tolerate, essentially. Now, got our gauge. Quick release type beat, he just snaps on. Done. So let me talk you through the grid. What we got here is a basic grid. You don't have to do it like this. I normally do it way messier, but for the purposes of this video, and the customer's probably going to get older one of these, I've just made it a bit neater so it's easier to read. Cylinder 1, 2, 3, 4, dry, wet, and percentage. That's how I normally do it. Now, dry is basically we crank on the engine without putting any oil down the cylinders. If we find anything bad, we move on to the wet test. I normally do a wet test anyway, just because it can highlight any other issues that we've got. It might be that you've got even compression dry, and then when you give cylinder 2 oil, it shoots up there, and the other guys don't respond, and then we know that cylinder 2 is much healthier than cylinder 1, 3, and 4. Now, a wet test is normally good for diagnosing a problem with your piston rings, the sealing surface of the bottom end of the engine, essentially. Okay, easily one of the biggest pains in the arse of doing a compression test is finding somewhere to put the gauge where you can actually read it and it's not going to throw itself around the engine bay. So let's try this. Right, we need to settle on a limit of how many compression strokes we're going to allow the engine to do. But what we're going to do is crank the engine over on cylinder 1 and see at what point it stops raising the compression. Now, how can you tell what a compression stroke is? Very simply, with all the plugs out, the engine will just sit there going because there's no compression, there's no resistance. With one cylinder plugged, it'll go. That is the piston coming up and compressing the air in the bore. So, like I say, we'll ring its bell, we'll see what goes on. And as soon as it stops, we know how many we need to do for the rest of the cylinders to keep this consistent. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 turns. That's fine, no problem. There's our standard then. We'll go for 7 on all the other cylinders and see what we get. What's our reading? So these are done in intervals of 5. So 125, 130, 135, 140, and then 145, 150. So we're just above 140. You can use bar or PSI, it really doesn't matter. We're looking for consistency. Oh yeah, you gotta let the air out. That's what this button's for. 1, 2, 5, 6, 7. 155. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 155. It's not looking good for cylinder 1, folks. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. 150. Okay, we've got our numbers. Now let's go and find out what that means. So we've got our dry, cold, I should mention. This compression test is done from cold. We will do another one from warm and compare because we want to check the health of the engine across all points. Now, we've got our figures. How do we figure that out? So we want to take the highest cylinder pressure, so 155. Our tolerance is 10%. You can go up to 15% tolerance if you want to make yourself feel a bit better. I prefer to work on these tighter tolerances because it just takes out the guesswork. If you run a tight tolerance and it passes, happy days, you know? Now, we need to work out 10% of 155, which is obviously 15.5. So, 155, don't take the piss out of me if you're using a calculator, all right? It's one of the things I really struggle with is numbers, can't help it. Right, 155 minus 15.5, 139.5, okay? So to be within 10% spec, the minimum compression should be 139.5. So we are just above the minimum, all right? Now, we're only 5 PSI low on cylinder 4, not overly worried about that. Like I say, these can be within range. That's actually quite even. Number 1 is the treble cylinder, but even then, I'm not actually that worried about it. It is actually reasonably healthy. So, fingers crossed, I'm starting to think we might just need to clean those plugs up and maybe we'll be there. But that's ultimately how you calculate where you're at. And now we just need to repeat this process wet. We just want to put about a teaspoon's worth of oil in each bore, do the test again, same thing, 7 rotations. We'll clean the plugs, put everything back together, fire the engine up and let it run up to temperature. Then we will do this test one more time hot and just check our consistency there. And we're done. That's it. That's a compression test. I'm probably going to go ahead and do this off camera. I mean, ultimately, you need to dribble a bit of oil down the cylinder bore and do everything I've just showed you again. So I'll see you guys in a little bit, all right? All right, we're back. Now, before you start typing that you're supposed to do this test hot, why did I do a wet test with a cold engine? Very, very simple. It's just an extra step that can tell you something. The more data you gather, the more data you can extrapolate from. So what I've done here, I put oil down the bores, just 3 squeezes from an oil can. What I was hoping was not going to happen was that this cylinder was going to suddenly jump to the same reading as these lot. How this test basically works is in your bore, your piston rings are a little bit loose when they're cold, and as everything warms up, they seal more tightly. If you've got one cylinder with a really knackered piston ring and 3 with perfectly fine piston rings, the increase in that first cylinder is very likely to be much, much higher than the other 3. So what I'm after here is just consistency. What would have sucked is 140 screaming up to 170 in line with the other cylinders when we added oil. That would have been a sign of badly worn rings from cold. Whereas what we've actually seen is a lovely, even improvement. What does that mean? Well, 10 to 20 PSI is a reasonable amount to expect the pressure to go up when you're doing this test with oil. And we've got 15, 15, 20, 15. Happy days. What am I starting to suspect? I'm starting to suspect that we might have a coked up valve, probably from the engine running too rich. I think we've got a load of unburnt fuel that was sitting on a valve seat, and we're just not quite sealing on the top end. I'm hoping we've got a top end issue. Reason being is, it's possible to be able to rectify that without having to blow the engine apart. Now, there's our cold test results. We'll put cold. Get it together, Kyle. So what's our game plan now? Well, we're going to thoroughly, and I do mean thoroughly, clean these plugs. And then we're going to The end of that one doesn't look great. Looking at the sheer amount of oil deposits and carbon deposits on these plugs, and the fact that that one there's got a gap of about 0.4 of a gnat's arse, as has that one. Those two plugs are mangled. The gap's all wrong on them. Right, here's what we're going to do instead. We're putting these over there. I think I've got a spare set of sort of used-ish but good NGKs knocking about. We're going to put those in there because I know they work. That's why I kept them. We'll fire it up. We'll see how she runs. If we run on all 4 cylinders, we're going to let the engine alone. We'll just let it get nice and warm, clear its lungs, and hopefully, with the successful series of ignition strokes, we might see a reduction in our carbon. We'll pull the plugs, then we can have another look. We can look at our mixtures on a nice fresh set of plugs. And then, once the engine's warm, we'll do the compression test again. I'm not going to make you watch that, obviously. I'll do it hot. We'll compare those results. We'll see if we can make a diagnosis. What I'm starting to suspect is these plugs, 1 and 3, were not doing their job for whatever reason, because the electrode's bent. Get a close-up of that, Kyle. He's not going to do it. I know he won't. Because the electrodes are bent on 1 and 3, I'm suspecting that they weren't sparking powerfully enough to ignite the excess fuel that this carburettor is giving it, and it literally just started to die out. I think in tandem with that, what's the mileage on this engine? The car's only on 131k, so really, I wouldn't think it is anything major. But we might see a valve stem seal failed or something and it's letting oil leak down into number 1. Fingers crossed, it's just where those plugs weren't firing, and once we get a set of plugs in it that it can actually use, who can say? Maybe we're back on 4 cylinders, maybe we can wind the fueling in because it's now running properly. We're back on 4, we're running nice and lean. There's our emissions situation sorted out. It's an 80s Volkswagen, that's not going to happen. They don't brake, then when they brake in a weird way. It's my life, it's my whole life. In we go. Like I say, these plugs are used, but they're cleaned up. What we're looking for right now is seeing if our problem goes away with a nice set of functioning plugs. Number 3 can be a bit far. I didn't put gloves on again. How do I keep doing that? What I'm hoping for is a successful start up on 4 cylinders, and then we'll dial in the carb at the same time. There's no sense in running this engine needlessly rich just for the sake of it. And then, yeah, if we can get the engine running right on these 4, then at that point, it's academic, and we will still check the compression because we're doing a health check. But we can be comfortable in the fact that we've come close to solving the issue at least. Nipping plugs, not crushing them down, thanks. Ta, appreciate it. Click, that's all they need. A word to the wise, you will get some smoke after this because obviously we've put a load of oil down its throat. It should burn off quite quickly. I'm going to get some carb tuning bingles to hand. He's lost them. Very good, Kyle, well done. 4 cylinders immediately running on 4. That's already better. We're a little bit spluttery. Let's wind our mixture in a bit. See, we're losing. Whoopsie daisy. Yeah, we've definitely got a splutter still, but we're not running on 3 anymore. And we're not smoky. Just gonna let it find its feet if it will. Timing belt covers like to do that on these. We're not perfect, but we're definitely better than we were. Just gonna adjust some timing. Now we're running on 4, the engine itself now has an opportunity to clear itself. Just dial a bit more advancing. Oh, okay, we were running too much advance. That's interesting to know. So another thing I spotted when I first looked at this car is it doesn't have a vacuum advance on it. Never seen that before on a Scirocco, it's definitely not standard. Someone's just chucked an distributor in, that's already better. Silk. I am going to attempt to clear the idle side of things again, just bring the mixture in a bit. Definitely still got a splutter. While we're warming up, I'm just going to check for an air leak, just in case. What are we saying? Oh. Alright, we might have some air intrusion. There's a little bit of a boost. Much smoother with that, isn't it? That might explain why it was having to be run rich. It does look like we've got a slight air leak. Ah, yeah. Alright. Yeah, okay. So, I'm going to try and nip up those mounting screws, see if that helps. I think another 8 valve lives to fight another day, frankly. I think we're alright. The carb flange has definitely got some give to it. Ah, this one was quite loose. Alright, still not what I would consider a perfect idle, but we're better. What's our speed? Just over 1 grand. That wants to come down a bit more. It's not making it easy, old girl. I can't know what I'm doing. It sounds like a timing belt's been done up way too tight, to be honest. Take this air box off. We're going to just drizzle the tiniest bit of water in there while revving the engine. See if we can decoke our valves. We'll steam clean the inside of the engine, essentially. Now for the obligatory disclaimer. Do not do this. That sounds really bad. I would rather come across as patronising with this situation than deal with a bunch of people who've knackered their engines. Don't do this unless you know what you're doing. I've been doing it this way for years, never once had a problem because I am super careful. I am simply showing you what I did with the vehicle at this point to try and decoke the engine because it was clearly really badly coked up. There are additives you can buy, there are other methods you can use. I am simply showing you the process of decoking an engine the old-fashioned way, and you need a feather touch with the water. If you put too much water in there, you will destroy your engine. Okay? It could not get more blatant and straightforward of a disclaimer than that. I am explicitly telling you, do not do this unless you know what you're doing. I know what I'm doing, and that's why I've done it that way. This worked. It works. It's worked for 70 years. But if you've never done it before, you don't want to be putting water anywhere near the intake side of your engine. Okay? Please. That's it. I'm absolving myself of all responsibility. Do not pour water in your engine. This is one of the few times where I will say if you are not absolutely sure what you're doing, whether you need to do this, don't do it. If you pour too much water in one go, you can hydrolock your engine and your engine will be fucked. So be sure that you need to do this, alright? But I'm convinced we're coked up, so we're gonna just drizzle the tiniest amount of water in while revving the engine up. That's helped. It's running better already. Like I say, we just do a tiny bit at a time. As you can see, of that cap full, well, it was till about here, I used barely any. Don't push it any further than that. That is instantly improved. She's still a little bit on the juddery side. Let's check our carb flange situation again. We definitely have an air leak. You see the way the engine stalls off then. Shush. I wonder if we're looking at possibly a cracked carburettor flange. Let me get on to the owner a minute. We'll find out if they put a new one on this recently, because it does have an awful lot of movement. All right, nothing immediately obvious there. Oh, hang on. That seal's popped up the wrong side of that. Got some crack in there. Looks like we might have some crack in there. Okay, let's get this out. See what we can see. What we got. Definitely signs of fuel making its way out between the flange and the flange, as it were. Oh, bingo. All day long. Whopping great split there. Another one there. That's done. New or old, I don't really care. That's split to absolute buggery. That'll be the problem. Guarantee it, that'll be the problem. So our Weber's going back on. I've just drizzled a little Draper D542 onto the gasket surface, both sides. It just helps a used gasket to seal, because obviously we weren't expecting to be doing any of this today. We were testing compression, but let's strike while the iron's hot. It will work. Obviously you need to assess your gasket, but this one, I know from looking at it, the gasket's in okay condition. But I just wanted to make absolutely certain that it's sealed. Obviously it's trivial for us to grab another gasket and throw it in, that's fine, but obviously strike while the iron's hot, we're underway. This will do us for now, gets us a straight answer as to whether our running problem's fixed, and then we can come back in and mop up after the fact. We're diagnosing. If we can diagnose and fix in the same stretch, then happy days. I think we're quite well positioned now to see if the old girl's feeling any better. Just gonna back the timing off just a skosh. Scientific for small amount. Let's see if we start, and let's hope against hope that we aren't smoky when we fire up this time. Oh, that is endlessly better than it was. We can now look at adjusting things, I think. Alright, that's a good sign. It doesn't want to be run any richer. Whereas before it was asking for loads of fuel. Definitely happier. Cool, I'm just going to test out these nuts on this carb again. The mounting method on these is less than ideal. That's an improvement. Here we go. I'm just tidying up these nuts here. Smoothing right out now. Okay, so we can look at bringing the idle speed down in a minute, and then way better. That's all four. That's running quite neat actually. That's fine, runs nicely like that. Right, I think what it needs now is a bloody good drive, and then what we'll do, we'll park it overnight, we'll see how it starts from cold, and then we'll get it up to temp, We'll whistle the plugs out. We'll check. We'll see how everybody's doing. But that's good. So what I've just done there is kick the accelerator pump, and what that does is dumps extra fuel in when the engine's not quite ready for it yet. If you do what I just did, you bring it in slowly, it makes use of it and then settles down. So far so good. What's that idle speed saying? Right, that's bang on 950. All right, apologies in advance for the shoddy camera work. Ella. So, beforehand, she'd fire up and run rough as anything, really smoky, stunk of fuel, and then had basically no power. We've started straight up. I'm seeing no smoke. We're not actually on the highway here, but still. Buckle up, buckaroos. Holy moly, that guy was shifting. I don't know what's going on with the indicator relay on this thing. Okay, dodgy indicator switch apparently. Wow, what an irritating noise. There it goes. Don't know what the deal is with that. Okay, we're indicating right for a bit. There's no one behind us. And we're going right round sight, so worst case scenario, everybody just thinks I'm a noob. So, second gear, please stop doing that. We're losing a bit of pep under throttle when we boot it. It's not terrible. It could be better, but obviously we've got no vacuum advance. So, it is what it is on that front. But yeah, what's our idle? She's clearing her lungs because the idle's coming up. That's good. That's what we want. So basically right now, what I'm doing is getting all the cylinders up to the correct temperature so they are properly hot, hopefully burning off any excess oil that we might have involved in our situation. Just a couple of big bootfuls every now and again. The reason for that is because we're trying to clear our cylinder bores out. That's better already. It improves every lap we do. So I think that'll probably do for now. So yeah, we'll come back when we're cold. This lorry's doing another circuit of sight, so let me move out of his way. Ooh. Okay, it shuts up when the headlights are on. Fine. Yeah. All right, so how are we idling now? Idle speed, bang on the money. Am I hearing any coughing and spluttering? That runs pretty bloody well, actually. It'll want some refinement, but we can do refinement later. Just easing the old girl back into it. That was a shocking amount of oil and fuel to try and burn through. So obviously, let's let it clear out naturally. It's good for the engine to do it that way. I'm going to recommend to the fella that we do an oil change as well. But yeah, much better. Much better. Thank God for that. I was worried we were going to have another top end rebuild on our hands. All right, it's the next day. Checking for two things. I want to see what the smoke situation's like and also how it starts. Right, come on, I'll go. First flick of the key, innit? Definitely. Lovely. Whoa. Okay, yeah. Major smoke issue. That was blue. That's oil smoke. All right. Okay, as you can hear, we're running reasonably well. We're nearly up to temperature. I'm just going to see if I can get away with a little bit of adjustment on the mixture, but it's definitely improved it a bit. Right, we've solved our running issue. We're running on 4 cylinders. That was the problem. There's no way it would have passed the emissions like that because it was throwing out a load of unburnt petrol and it was running dog rich. So now we're a little bit smoky on startup when we first fire the engine up. So I'll tell you what I'm currently suspecting is that the valve stem seals are leaking on at least 1 cylinder. Based on our plugs, I'd say 1 and 3. I'll just bring the engine up a minute. Let's turn her off. I am suspecting that we've got valve stem seals beginning to fail, or one that's definitely failed. Now this is where the I'm at work part of me clashes massively with the YouTube part of me. I'm not here to take the head off this engine. I'm not here to change the stem seals. I'm here to get it through an MOT. So we've adjusted the mixture. It is 100% better, easily. Marked difference across the board. It drives nicely, it starts well, it idles nicely, everything's relatively happy. But we have found a problem. Are we going to fix that problem? Being honest, probably not. If the car goes through the MOT on the emissions, my job's done. If this was your own car, or you'd brought it to me and just wanted me to find out what the problem is, give the engine a health check and then fix everything that's wrong with it, at this point I would very likely be whipping the head off and changing the valve stem seals. All this is caveated by saying I've spoken to the owner. He had valve stem seals done the last time the head was off, and that head's looking pretty spanky, to be honest. So it's been done in recent years and at recent miles. Next port of call is potentially valve guides. Now the valve guide is the piece of metal that the valve runs through in the cylinder head, and believe it or not, they're not often part of the head. They're actually a separate piece. They heat the head up to expand the hole, hammer these guides in, normally made of a softer material, and then as the head cools down and shrinks, it grips onto the guides. They can crack, they can wear out. If the valve's not running completely true, it will saw away essentially, will wear away at the valve guide. Yes, that's what the stem seals are there for, but here's the thing. If the valve isn't running completely true, or the guide is knackered enough that it allows the valve to do this, then as the valve is able to do that, it can open and shut that valve stem seal. So if it ends up sitting on the piss, you get oil in your bores. Would also explain, potentially, why we're a little down on compression. Because if the valve's covered in gack, it ain't going to seal completely. It will seal, but not perfectly. And that might explain why cylinder one's a little down. Let's get these plugs out. Thankfully, I'm wearing my asbestos hands today. All right, our plugs aren't looking amazing. We've got oil on definitely 1, definitely 3. We've got a skosh on 2 as well. Now that's a turn up for the books. If you look at the ceramic of the plug, mixtures aren't a million miles off. Obviously, we were running it quite rich initially because of the air leak. Right, reading the plugs, when you actually wipe off the oil, the mixtures don't seem a million miles out. Now, stop laughing. I know we're looking rich right now, but you got to think, we're burning oil. And when you burn oil, you end up with leftover carbon that blackens the plugs. They were a little rich initially. Now, I ain't overly concerned about that, and the reason I'm not overly concerned about that is because we were battling an air leak the entire time. If you remember, we put those new plugs in, got it onto 4 cylinders, then we had to find out why it wasn't running properly. We had the air leak, and the engine was running dog rich, so obviously all of that marks the plug, so to speak. These things don't just wash themselves on their own. More importantly than any of that, I now want to know what the compression's like hot. So let's just do that. Do you want to plug the coil back in, Kyle? That'd be wicked. Years of experience that's taught me if you plug the coil in, the engine will start. I'm just going to want to run the engine at a fast idle for a couple of seconds just to help it clear its lungs. we go. Happy days. Right, let's talk through these compression test results. All right, so hot, cylinder 1, 135, cylinder 2, 140, cylinder 3, 145, cylinder 4, 145. On a wet test, everything went up by 5. The bottom end is not the problem here, 100%. Now, here's a bit of advice for the home gamer. Pickup truck guy with an absolutely excellent beard. Fair play. Fair play. I could show you on a fancy emissions tester if it wasn't broken right now. Being honest. I could show you how to dial all that stuff in on an emissions tester, and maybe we'll do that in another video. But right now, I think this needs to be geared towards the home gamer. So, here's what you do. This came to me to get it through an MOT. We're booked in for an MOT next week. We've done rear brakes and I feel potentially solve the emissions issue. Use the MOT station. You don't have to have an MOT booked in to use their emissions equipment, believe it or not. If you contact your local MOT centre, their emissions machines have a thing called free test. And they use it themselves usually in the course of their diagnostic day. If they've got a car that's potentially got an oxygen sensor gone down or whatever. But they can actually test emissions without entering the car into a full MOT test. It's not on the system, nothing like that. This is great for tuning. It supports your local businesses. A lot of MOT stations, like the guys over the back of me that this is going to, are family run. Chuck some money their way. Everybody loves beer tokens. They'll have an amount of money that they want to do that, but what I'm saying is, you don't have to go out and spend hundreds and hundreds of pounds on emissions tested equipment if you only need to use it to diagnose and isolate a fault with your emissions side of things, your fuel system, whatever. Take it down to your local MOT station, ask them to do a free test, find out how much it is first obviously, but it will tell you a lot. It won't just tell you your CO and whether it will pass an MOT, it can tell you your hydrocarbons in parts per million. If you've got a car that doesn't have a rev counter, it will tell you the precise idle speed when the engine's hot. It will tell you an awful lot. So that would be my recommendation. So what we're going to do, in the spirit of me not being a hypocrite, telling you to do one thing and then me doing another, this is going for MOT now. When we get the chart back, what we'll do, I'll give you an update. And the reason I'm going to do that now and sort of slice this little mini series in half, because one or two things is going to happen. Either this worked, the car goes through its emissions, passes with flying colours, and happy days, and we replace it with something from the same owner, but a much rarer, odder spec of Scirocco that's not been on the road in many, many years. Oh, that's coming to me either way. But the other option there is it doesn't. It face plants. We need to find out why this thing's burning oil. We need to drill a little deeper into this. In which case, you may as well join me while we take the head off of another Scirocco. Shirley is still over there with the head off. So we've basically got a little choose your own adventure situation right now. We're either going to turn to page 76 and end up with a very rare, unusual car in desperate need of recommissioning that's been off the road since 2009, or we follow through on this. We find out what the actual problem is. Again, we were diagnosing an emissions problem and I happened to notice it was running on 3 cylinders. I think we've cracked it. I really do. But there's obviously a problem there. Now, the owner is au fait. He may want to take care of it himself. He might think, sod it, it's down there anyway. Whistle the cylinder head off, take it to Thatch. Just take it to Thatch, man, honestly. If you've got a cylinder head coming off a car, just take it to Thatch. We'll take a view, we'll find out what's going on, but I really don't think it's bottom end. I really don't. Just looking at the compressions there, hot and cold, wet and dry, and I feel confident in that diagnosis because we did both. So, with all that said, thank you for watching SkyRocket Automotive today. I hope you've enjoyed this. It's a little bit more of a technical deep dive than my usual bollocksing around being a general big fat idiot working on old cars. It's good to do one of these once in a while, just to show everybody that I'm not a complete idiot. All right? Godspeed, little Rocco. I hope you have a nice weekend, because that is Friday, Arvo. As you can see from the car park being empty in the background, if I framed the shot right, which I definitely didn't, it's just myself over there, because everyone's gone home and I haven't, and that's a sin. I can hear the Budweiser brewery calling out my name. They need air support, and it's time for the SkyRocket to be deployed. That was a shit joke, Jesus Christ. Thank you for watching, have a nice weekend.